I'm going to just do a quick introduction. So my name is Lindo. I work with the marketing team at SurveyCTO. Excited to be helping with today's webinar, where we're bringing you research from two awardees of our research grant. And we're going to be discussing research in agriculture and farmer support, sort of as a means to increase productivity as well as revenue. As we all know, in many, many countries, we have a lot of smallholder farmers who sort of depend on farming as their main source of income. And so exploring ways in which we can increase productivity and increase revenue to improve livelihoods for these farmers is a great way for international development goals. And so we're excited for the researchers who are here with us to present their work.
All right. Thank you so much, Lindo. Welcome again, everyone, to this webinar that we have today. I think Lindo has already laid out what's on the table. My name is Mofia Piri. I'm based in Lusaka, Zambia, and I'm part of the customer success team at Doability. For this particular webinar, I will be your moderator, really just making sure that you're able to follow the presentation well, and also if you have any questions, making sure those questions are answered. Our webinar today is titled Boosting Agricultural Productivity and Revenue Through Farmer Support. And we have two presentations. The first we'll have is Matilde. Matilde is an economist specialized in development economics and policy evaluation. Matilde has a PhD in economics from Nova School of Business and Economics, and is currently working as a consultant for the World Bank in areas of social protection, entrepreneurship, and gender. As a researcher, she has extensive experience conducting surveys and field work in Guinea-Bissau and Mozambique. Maybe that's why we have a huge contingent from Mozambique. Her research has mainly focused on the role that information plays in different contexts and the importance of inequalities in shaping aggregate and individual behavior. She has additionally worked on projects dealing with the private sector, agricultural development, and financial inclusion. And so we're looking forward to hear from Matilde. Our second presenter will be Guanghong, who is an economics PhD candidate at the Department of Economics at the University of California, Santa Cruz. His research focuses on the economic development of lower income countries and how technology can help with global poverty reduction. He has conducted fieldwork in Kenya, Rwanda, and Tanzania. He's currently a visiting scientist at the International Livestock Research Institute in Nairobi, Kenya. But he also has other fields that he's interested in, such as the development economics and applied econometrics. So those are our two presenters. I won't take any more of your time. I will ask our first presenter to start. And then we'll have the second presentation. After the second presentation, we can then get into any questions that you might have. As our presenters are making their presentations, as Lindo mentioned, I'm going to start a poll. This poll is really just to get a sense of how relevant part of the discussion that we are having is. Just basically two questions. So please feel free to use the poll option at the bottom there. This will run throughout the presentations. At the end, I'll end the poll, and then we'll be able to review some of your views on those two particular areas. All right, our presenters, over to you.
Thanks everybody for being here, and thanks for SurveyCTO for the invitation and the funding support for my project, Farm to Fresh, Digital Traceability and Quality Upgrading in Kenya Dairy Value Chain. The project is also funded by MIT JPAL, NSF, and West Fund at the University of Chicago. 16 years ago, there's a big scandal in the milk industry in China. What happened is that the milk firms, they added chemical stuff called melamine into the infant formula so that they can increase the protein content so that they can pass national standards. So melamine is something that is highly related to the risk of getting a disease called kidney stone, right? So as a symptom that, as you remember, all those scary pictures of all the infant has, abnormal size of the head. And in the worst case scenario, they will die from that. right? As a result, actually, the incidence has in total 4 babies died, and more than 50,000 children were hospitalized. And as you can see that I attached the picture here, that it's quite shocking that at that time, the hospital even have a special window for those babies who are affected by this, right? So we have a national recall of 700 tons of milk powders. And this is a picture that they recorded milk powders and they destroyed all of them. So the right bottom picture basically shows the empty shelf of the Carrefour in China, because at that time nobody wants to buy the milk, the milk products, or dare to buy the milk products. So this incident basically taught me a really important lesson that if we don't take care of if we don't pay attention to the quality of the food we eat, it can raise serious public health concern, right? On top of that, economic-wise, for the farmers who are the producers of the food we eat, it's also important for them to move from the subsistence farming to the market-driven commercial agriculture, right? So we know the quality of agricultural products is important, but the farmers might not have the incentives to invest in the quality upgrading if they are not rewarded for producing high-quality products, right? So the question right now is, do we have the quality incentives along the value chain? The answer is yes and no, because for one hand, right, based on your own experience, that you are the end customers, let's say you go to the supermarket, you buy the milk, you buy the chocolate bar, right? You pay different price to different brands. The different brands basically means the different qualities of that product, right? So you clearly know that these are quality incentives for the processors, right? Oftentimes we also have, quality transmissions from the processors to the intermediaries, because nobody will buy a lump sum from the intermediaries without verifying the quality of the products, right? But oftentimes in the agricultural value chains, that it consists of many smallholder farmers, and the open question is that whether and how the quality transmissions is from the intermediaries to the upstream farmers. And oftentimes the disorganized agricultural value chains with many intermediaries often prevent the transmission of the quality incentives to the upstream farmers. So this is a case among many dairy cooperatives in developing countries. So I still remember that a few years back, the first time I visited the dairy cooperatives in Kenya, with all the vivid memory from 2008 in China, that I saw those farmers delivering the milk to the cooperatives. The transporters take the milk from the farmers. They know quality test has been taken. So my immediate reaction is that, okay, if you are not testing the milk, how would you control the quality, especially given the situation that the milk is something that you cannot observe the quality of the milk, right? So then I basically spent time investigating this case, and it turns out to be the case that it is a valid concern. So this is how I started this project. So actually in Kenya, the dairy sector is a pretty important sector for the country. There are 2 million smallholder farmers in total who is producing milk every day in Kenya. And the rural farmers, they mainly sell to the cooperatives in the formal value chain. The downstream buyers, in our cases, the milk processors, they always pay the quality premium to the dairy cooperatives, but no quality incentives is paid to the farmers. So this is quite intuitive that for the milk processors, if the milk quality is high, they can use the raw milk to produce high value products like cheese and yogurt. If the quality is normal, they can just produce those packaged liquid milk that you see in the supermarket. But if the raw milk quality is super, super low, well, you cannot, consume this milk because it's, unsafe, right? So the reason why the downstream buyers, they can pay a premium is because they can always test the milk as a whole consignment, usually for 3,000 liters. But for the smallholder farmers, they usually produce or sell, less than 10 liters to the cooperatives. So testing cost is super high for individual farmers, in terms of both the time and the money. And from my data that I basically test the individual farmers' milk in the lab, and 62% of farmers' milk, they fill at least one of the KEBSs, which is the Kenya Bureau of Standards requirement on the 3 parameters on the milk, which is added water, butterfat, and bacterial. And 13% of farmers' milk meet all the processors' requirement on the 3 parameters. So what does that mean? So basically we have two sort of standards. One is set by the government. It's a minimal required standards that you have to meet for the milk, be allowed to be traded by law. Right. There is another standard set by the processor, which is stricter, which is higher. Basically, the processor said, okay, above the national standard is not enough. It's just a normal quality. But if your milk is even higher, you meet my requirement, so I will pay you the quality bonuses. So as you can see, that 13, is higher than that standard set by the processor. 1662 is below the standards in terms of at least one of the parameters. And if you do the math in the middle, there will be 25% farmers' milk is normal type. And for my project, I mainly have three components. First one is, in order to have add accountability and transparency in a disorganized value chain, I established the traceability system among the dairy cooperatives that I'm working with. So I basically link from the farmers to the aggregated containers, to the transporters, to the cooling plant, to the final processors, all the way throughout the value chain. And second component of my study is that, based on that traceability system, I developed a Bayesian statistical model to detect individual farmers' milk quality type based on aggregated quality data. Because the bottleneck is so clear that the testing cost is high, right? So these two components together basically trying to solve the problem of is there any way that we can review the quality information in a sustainable way, right? After that, I'm actually running this individual level RCT randomized control trial to provide farmers' milk quality information to both the dairy cooperatives and farmers themselves. And so basically, due to the time constraint of the presentation today, I will briefly talk about the traceability system I established, and I will show the results of the Bayesian statistical model and briefly mention about the RCT I'm conducting nowadays. Okay, to do the project, my research question is that, so if you can imagine that in a perfect world, if the quality is perfectly, observed, right, you basically just pay what you see. But in reality, that you cannot tell the milk quality by eyes that how much added percentage of added water it is, the bacteria and the butterfat, right? So then the intervention is designed to say, okay, what if I review the information, reduce the information frictions between buyers and sellers, what will happen, right? So my primary fundamental question is that if I provide information, well, the cooperatives act on the information I provided to them, right? For example, do they change the contracting practices? They require the quality upgrading, given the channels to the low quality farmers and reward high quality farmers, right? So based on the reaction from the cooperatives, I will also see whether the intervention will cause the farmers themselves to invest in the quality upgrading. For example, there are some things they can do. For example, they can buy high quality animal feeds to increase the butterfat level in the milk. They can use the metal containers so that they can reduce the bacteria. At the end, I will see whether the intervention increase the milk quality. I will also have a secondary question that is it profitable for the cooperatives to set up the milk digital traceability system, or the cost of the system and the associated milk tax outweigh the benefit of increased price premiums? So a preview for the results. The Bayesian model works pretty well. So the model predicted quality shows a significant high correlation, significant at the 1% level, with a one-time test at the individual farmer level. So the correlation is 0.8 for added water and 0.6 for the butterfat among 940 different farmers from 6 different collection routes from 2 dairy cooperatives. And the intervention is still ongoing, but the preliminary result, the evidence shows that the cooperatives, once I share the information, they already train the low quality farmers. They already warn the farmers who not to add water into the milk. They're also considering reward those high quality farmers. All right, so let's go delve into the details of the component by one. First one is the traceability system. So how does the formal value chain look like in Kenya dairy sector? So in upstream, you have the dairy farmers who usually they produce milk every day, and then the dairy cooperatives basically hire the transporters to collect the milk from the farmers every day. So the transporters either use the motorbike or trucks to carry all those 50-liter cans, and the 50-liter cans is basically filled in by it ranges from 5 to 15 farmers per can, depends on the volume of the farmers. So one thing I need to note is that at this point, once the transporters take the milk from farmers, the ownership of the milk already transferred from the farmers to the cooperatives. So, and here, and here, so they will ship the milk to the milk collection centers and ship to the cooling plant. All middle stages, the milk belongs to the cooperatives. And here, they are waiting for the processor. The biggest one in Canada is called the Brookside. So they will have a truck to come to collect milk from the cooling plant. For sure, they will do the comprehensive milk test for, on average, like 3,000 liters milk all at once. At this point, once the milk is taken by the processor, the ownership of the milk is transferred from the cooperatives to the processor. So at this one, at this stage, that it's impossible for the cooperatives to test every single farmer's milk every day because the testing cost is so high. And here they're basically waiting for the processors to come to test and collect the milk from them. So in the middle, they are kind of like bearing the risk if the milk they collected from the farmers is low or quality is low. Right. So what I did first is that I established the traceability system. How does that work? So as you can see, the left upper picture shows that originally all the cans, 50 liter cans, they are unmarked. So you have no idea whose milk is filling into which can. The first thing I did is I assigned unique ID for each of those 50 liter aluminum can. Right. So then the transporters, they are equipped with the digital tool to record information I need. As you can see that, so they will record which route, that is, which transporters is collecting the milk, right? They will choose whether it's morning session or afternoon session because sometimes the farmers will sell twice a day to the cooperatives. And for this is the place that they can record which can their milk is pouring into. The /1 basically means that sometimes the truck will run more than one trip, right? So I differentiate the trip 1 and trip 2 for different cans. And then I will record member ID for each member, and you will record tile weight and net weight of this farmer's milk. So that's basically how I link all the information together. So then on that, so I have what I call the traceability data, which is quite important for the Bayesian model. So to develop the model, the traceability data is not enough. I also need another element, which is a can level quality data. Imagine that, okay, I already mentioned that here you cannot test individual farmers, right? So then, I mean, you can, but you cannot test every day, right? But here, you are basically waiting for the processors to come to collect and test the milk, right? So the only place that if you want to intervene to test the quality is all those, 50 liter cans in the middle. So I did that actually. So then combining with these two elements, that I'm good enough, I'm good to go for using the model to predict individual farmers' milk quality. So how does that work? So basically the model utilizes the variations coming from the fact that the farmer's milk volume and which aggregated cans they fill, and which other farmers are contributing to that can, and the corresponding aggregated can test result, they vary differently, every day. So, to give an example that, okay, imagine that, okay, today, if my milk and Lindo's milk mix together and you test a can, right, it turns out to be bad. And next day, if my milk mixed with, Morpheus milk, the can turns out to be bad. And the third day, let's say Lindo's milk and the Morpheus milk mixed together and the can testing result turned out to be good. So what would you think? You will think I'm the farmer who is causing the problem. Right. But for sure, in reality, it won't be that simple because we are having not just 2 farmers in one can, right? We have 5 to 15 farmers in each can. So you do need some, equations to write it down, the relationship. So we have another fact is super helpful to us is that the theoretical aggregated can level quality is a weighted average of individual farmers' milk quality in that can, right? So to write it down in the math, so we have the raw obesity quality parameters. The can level quality is the weighted average of individual quality, and for added water butterfat, for example, right? But in reality, we know that you have some measurement errors, either coming from the traceability data or from the testing data, so you won't be perfectly having the relationship like this. So I model the likelihood in the way that, okay, based on this theoretical mean, there's also a room for measurement error, which is captured by the sigma can. I call it sigma can. But how large is the variation? How large is the measurement error? I don't know. So I just tell them, okay, I tell the model that I don't know how large the variation is. You basically draw from the prior distribution, which is the inverse gamma. I basically following the convention of the statistical literature that this is how they usually they basically call it non-informative priors for the parameter. Okay, so we all know that for the Bayesian model, we have likelihood, we have priors, we have so that we can get the posteriors, right? So what's the prior belief we have for individual farmers' quality, right? So let's take a look. Well, I plot this farmer level added water and the can level added water here, the histogram for your reference. So basically that one straightforward prior you have would be that, okay, at least the added water shouldn't be a negative number, right? You don't want a model give you a prediction that to say, well, the added water is a negative number. What does that mean, right? It doesn't make sense. And actually, according to the distribution of the farmer level added water, so the distribution looks like the half normal. So I basically tell the model that I don't know enough information about the milk quality, but at least I know it's following kind of like the half normal distribution as a prior. But there is one parameter for the specific distribution for the half normal, right? So I said, I don't know, you still help me to draw from the inverse gamma, which is a non-informative priors. So then in summary, we have the non-informative priors for the variation for the measurement error and for the shape of the half normal distribution. The only thing we tell the model is that, okay, this added water should follow the half normal. What's important for the model is that we rely on the weight matrix based on the traceability data and the can level quality testing. So we mainly ask the data to speak for itself, to do the prediction for us, right? So basically here is showing the Monte Carlo, the Markov chain Monte Carlo simulation result of the model fitting. So I usually run 4 chains. If I see all 4 chains mixing together, which means that they are converged well. One good thing about the Bayesian model I want to say is that instead of give you a point estimate, they give you a whole posterior distribution. So while taking into account uncertainty of the prediction of the model, farmer's quality. So as you can see that this is the point estimate, and you have 95% credit interval, and you have 99% of the credit interval in this posterior distribution. And how does the model work? I basically compare them, the point estimate, basically the black dots as you see from the estimation, against the one-time added water test. So the model works pretty well. As you can see, the correlation between those two is as high as 0.8. It's significant as 1% level, right? So one thing I want to point out is that one-time test won't be enough to review all the information for all days for the farmer's quality, because later on we do observe that the farmer's quality is kind of fluctuate among a different level. So that's why the Bayesian posterior distribution is perfectly for capturing that. For example, one day, if you show up to take the farmer sample, you might see the farmer added water is 5%. Some lucky day, maybe you see it's like, around 2, you think the farmer's milk is good. But on another day, maybe the farmers forget to dry enough the milk container, or if they added too much water intentionally, you will find out the added water will be like 8%. So that's one thing I want to mention here. Later on, we'll come back to this point. Another thing I did is that I look at the whole posterior distribution. I also calculate what's the chance of the farmers that if I show up in a random day to take the sample to test, that the quality is, fail the national standards, which is 4% added water. So I plot the probability against one-time test. As you can see that the higher the probability of added water being more than 4%, the higher the one-time test result would be. So you see this really clear upward trend. And I plot a similar thing, which is a probability of added water being less than 2%. As you can see that as expected, the downward, sloping trend is also, within our expectation. So this is for added water. We also have for butterfat, right? Butterfat is, the only difference is the priors for the parameter. Nothing, others, weighted average relationship is all the same. So how does the distribution for butterfat looks like? As you can see, different from added water, they cannot be entirely, it cannot be exactly 0. Right, because if it's exactly 0, basically you are buying a bunch of water, right? For sure, the butterfat will be a positive number. And look at the distribution that the only information we tell the model is that okay, it looks like the individual level is following the gamma distribution. But for the exact parameters, we don't know. You help us to draw from the non-informative priors. Okay, just in a nutshell, everything's the same. We rely on the weight matrix for the traceability data. We rely on the can level quality testing. We give just slightly different prior distribution for the butterfat to differentiate from the added water. So as always, they will mix well, converge, and show us the posterior distribution here. And I also plot this point estimate against one-time butterfat test. So this one shows the correlation of 0.8, which is also significant at the 1% level. I also did the same to plot the one-time test against the probability of butterfat being less than 3.25, which is the national standard, and 3.5. Actually, this is not for A5, but it's 3.8. Is the processor standards. So as we expected, this is downward sloping, and this is upward sloping. And as you remember, the third component for our project is that once I have the model information and the one-time test information, I will do a randomized RCT. Right. So this is actually really intriguing project and the research question for me, in the sense that because we mentioned that the bottleneck for the industry is that one-time test, you can't test every single farmers every day. It's too costly, right? So people will say, okay, what if you just show up in a random day to test? And I think that's a valid point, right? So we should try that, because but one thing you need to keep in mind is that whenever you show up to take the farmer sample, so that sample only reveal the day of the quality of on that single day, not the other days, right? But on the other hand, what we can do is that instead of like randomly show up to take the farmer's milk to test, and we can do is we continuously monitor the can level quality result, right? So I call it periodical review to follow literature in a dynamic moral hazard problem. So this is reviewed by the Bayesian model, right? The good thing about Bayesian model is that, okay, they can help to give an estimate about the long-term average, among those days for the monitoring period. They can also give you a posterior distribution, which you can use to calculate the probability of this farmer's milk to be good, bad, or normal on any single day you show up to take the sample, right? But the downside for that is that, okay, sure, you monitor for the long term, for the whole period, but there's more the model errors, right? So this one is also the downside of that. So we want to test, what if we show one-time test information with the cooperatives and farmers versus that we monitor for a period and we show the model result with the cooperatives and the farmers, and then we have a control group, which is non-information is shared with the cooperative as a benchmark for evaluate the treatment effect, right? The outcomes we're looking at, as we mentioned before, is that first of all, the cooperative reactions to different farmers. So this includes whether they require quality upgrading, train low quality farmers, and reward high quality farmers, etc. We also will look at the farmers' investment in the quality upgrading. And also another interesting thing to look at is that, okay, if the cooperative start request, higher standards for milk quality, would they sell more to the informal traders as a outside option? Eventually, we will also monitor the dynamic changes of the farmer's milk quality. So the current status of my project is that I already shared the first round of the information with both farmers and cooperatives. And the second round of quality monitoring is ongoing. And we are aiming for having 4 rounds in total before the mid-September. So please, all audience, please stay tuned. So I will try to find another chance to present the project once I have all the results and data in. And so a brief summary. So first, what we did is that we established the digital traceability system, linking farmers to aggregated containers, transporters to cooling plant to processors. Based on that, we developed the Bayesian model, which shows a significant high correlation with the one-time quality test. So which is 0.8 for added water and 0.6 for butterfat among 940 farmers. So basically, this method showcases a scalable model for enhancing the transparency and accountability across different type of value chains in a sustainable way. And also, we are currently conducting this individual level RCT to provide farmers milk quality information to both their cooperatives and farmers themselves. So we are comparing the model detection group versus random test group versus the control group. At the end, we have the Kyobohei Joe, who is a nephew of Samuel, who is a Kenyan dairy entrepreneur. So I wish every kid, can not just in Kenya but worldwide, can enjoy the safe and nutritional milk and have a good smell like Joe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we'll go straight to Matilde. If you can make your presentation, and then we'll move on. As Matilde is setting up.
Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, Guanghong, for a great presentation. I'm looking forward to see what happens next in your project. Also, thank you to SurveyCTO for having me here today, and just supporting this research and organizing this very nice webinar. So my name is Matilde. I am here to present evaluating the impact of a support hotline for cashew producers in Guinea-Bissau. So this is joint work with a lot of people, as you can see here on the screen. So we have Aliu, Braz, Nério, Aida, Matia, Duclésio, Adeusi, Júlio, and Davixen. And these are all people that are affiliated with the Bissau Economics Lab, which is like the main propeller for sort of this implementation of this study. I want to start by prefacing that what I'm going to show here today in terms of results are very preliminary results. Okay, so we left the field not so long ago, so we're still looking into the data and we're still, exploring all mechanisms, etc. So I'm going to show you, preliminary results to the work that we did. Moving on to the motivation. So we know that the promise of digital agriculture in benefiting millions of farmers worldwide has fallen short. So there's numerous attempts to implement subscription models to deliver information to farmers digitally that have struggled to make a profit. And there are some explanations to why this is happening. So the services are non-rival public goods. There's also information that can be easily shared, okay, which sort of reduces the potential for paying customers, which makes this subscription models less efficient. Okay, there's also this proliferation of low quality content, which might make users more reluctant to adopt these new services because it's hard to assess the quality of these services before, right? So what we thought is that alternatives to this standard subscription model may be needed, okay? And that is what we do, okay? So sort of an overview of our study is that we evaluate the effectiveness of a two-way information service designed to reduce information asymmetries between the users and the system relative, just to a standard subscription-based model. So we test how local agents supported by a team of cashew analysts compares with the effect of this information just being directly communicated to producers through recorded voice messages. Okay, so that's the first thing that we do. The second thing is that we also relax the constraint of this lack of competition among buyers in the cashew market, okay? So we do this to deal with the erosion of the role that information can have on the market, okay, because of this lack of competition. So we randomly allocate half of the local agents, which I will from now on just call focal points, okay, with a list of buyers' contacts to examine whether search barriers impede transactions in this market or not. Okay, so that's sort of the overview of what we did. With regards to the context, so Guinea-Bissau is a country in West Africa, which is home to approximately 1.9 million people. And about half of the families in Guinea-Bissau own cashew plantations, and cashew is the main source of income for 80% of them. Also importantly, cashew nuts comprises 90% of total exports of the country. Okay, and how does this normally work? So families, they sell their cashew production to approximately 5,000 to 10,000 intermediaries that then sell it to 30 to 60 exporters that then export it to India and Vietnam. Okay, so this is sort of the process that goes on. And this initial contact between the producer or between the families and the intermediary, they are done almost always in the village of the producer. in one unique sale per season. Okay, and this is what we know that normally happens, and it's also what we register to happen in our own sample. Also important is that approximately half of our producers, or only half of our producers, know how to read. Okay, so that's sort of the context of where we're working in. Also very important is to mention how atypical the cashew season was in 2023, okay, which was the year in which the intervention was set up. Okay, so not only was the 2023 cashew season one of the most difficult in the last decade, in the last 10 years, okay, with very low prices for the producers, it was also atypical in its shape, okay? So normally, cashew prices, they vary a lot throughout the season. And this does not happen at all during the season in which we were doing the intervention. Okay, so we had a very stable prices over the weeks of the cashew season. Okay, and this is extremely atypical. And I'm making this note here because I think it might be important for the way that we then will look at these preliminary results that I'm going to show. Okay, so this was something that was not expected by us when we were sort of designing the intervention. Okay, it was not something that we could thought about. So moving on to the design. So we used a cluster randomized control trial at the village level with 187 villages across 6 regions, okay? So 65 were control, 61 were treatment 1, 61 were also treatment 2, which I will explain very shortly, for a total of 1,384 cashew nut producers, okay? This was done in very spread across the country. So each color is going to represent each of the treatments, okay? And as you can see, it is spread almost across the whole country. In terms of the timeline of our project, so as I mentioned already, the cashew season that our intervention was targeting was the cashew season of 2023, and this normally runs between April and July. So we ran our baseline intervention in February, March of 2023. Okay, so our baseline data collection. Our implementation happened between March 2023 and February 2024. And our end line was collected between March and April 2024. So we did primary data collection. Okay, so we were on the field talking to producers, talking to focal points. We also conducted some phone interviews. Okay, so we used a collection of different forms, okay? So we used in total 6 different forms, all using SurveyCTO, some for producers, some for focal points. We also collected data at the village level, and we also collected some behavioral games. And in total, we had like 32 members all using these forms at the same time, depending on what we wanted to collect in a moment, okay? With regards to the treatments, so first, we have our control group, which is not a pure control, okay? So in our control group, what we have is we have producers being introduced, being presented to the Nakalu service, and its past average impact on revenue of cashew nut producers, okay? And this value basically came from a previous study that just studied the entrance of the Nakalu service into the country. And they were invited to subscribe, okay, paying the cost of subscription. So this was our control group. And then we move on to our first treatment, okay, which basically gives exactly the same, exactly the same introduction to the Nakalu service, which I will explain very shortly what it is. And it adds this focal points, okay? So communities, we asked communities for them to choose a focal point per village who was provided with periodically high quality market information from a group of trained analysts that were based in the capital of Guinea-Bissau. Okay, so these focal points, they were instructed to organize weekly meetings with the community to give bilateral advice and to share relevant information on prices with the analysts. Okay, so this is what we asked them to do. So we asked communities to sort of choose these focal points, choose these people among their community, okay, to be the local agents between these analysts, okay, and the producers. And then we had treatment 2, which is basically the same as the control group. So introduction of the Nakalu service, having these focal points, but with which we also shared with the focal points these contact details of buyers, of intermediaries, okay, that were operating in the region. And we did this late in the season. So these were our 3 treatments, okay? So with regards to Nakalu, so this is a service, so it's a market information service that was sending messages to producers, particularly 1 message per week. And what were these messages? So they were synthesized and simplified news about the national cashew market. They had a range of the latest region-specific farm gate prices, okay? And they also had news about the international cashew market and advice on whether it is a good time to sell or not, okay, given a certain threshold. And these were prepared, by a group of analysts, by a group of experts on the cashew market. With regards to our focal points, so that was part of the treatment for the Nakalu service. With regards to the focal points, these are, as I already mentioned, they are members of the village that were appointed or elected to play this role of focal point, okay? So when we went to the villages, basically we asked for these communities to choose someone to play this role of focal point. And depending on the region, this would, depending on where we were, this would lead to different ways of choosing these people. This could have been, this was either by appointment or by election. And we didn't really interfere on how this choice was done, okay? Something that might be worth to mention is that, as you can see here, 88% of these focal points have cashew as their source of income, okay? It's part of their source of income. Also might be relevant here to mention that 93%, approximately 93% of these focal points, they know how to read, which is a little bit a value higher than the one that I showed for the sample of producers. Okay, so these focal points seem to be a little bit more literate. Moving on to, looking at a first stage on whether these treatments that we did, if they worked or not, okay, if they are moving in the right direction or not. So what we did at Endline was, in control villages, we did exactly the same procedure of asking for the communities to sort of select someone that could potentially play the role of a focal point, okay? So using this comparison group, we basically looked at the, at the impact of the treatment, okay? So we see here that it's very strong in terms of, number of messages, number of voice messages received, number of calls made to these analysts. So we see that our focal points seem to be engaging a lot more with the service than their comparison group, okay? We also see that the sharing of the intermediary lists worked in the direction that we expected. So this is strong. So treatment 2, okay, where we did this distribution of the list, have on average more contacts. So that's good. That's what we were hoping that would happen. And also we can see that focal points in treatment villages, they advised a substantially larger number of producers during the 2023 season. Okay, so that's also positive. That's sort of a first stage that seems to show that our intervention sort of was well implemented, okay, or it worked in terms of implementation. So that's a good point. Moving on to the results of the producers, I just want to mention here, so we used an ANCOVA regression here, and we used sector fixed effects, and we clustered our standard errors at the village level. And so let me show you the results. So the first results that we have is with regards to producers' access to market information. So we can see in the first line that there is no change in the likelihood of producers in treatment 1 and treatment 2 to report receiving market information, but we do see that producers in treatment villages report to have used the Nakalu market information system more than in the villages with only the subscription mode, so our control group. And secondly, and this is the last result that I'm going to show you today, is the producers' cashew sales. So what we can see here in the first line is the negative impact on the average price, okay, which mostly seems to be driven by the producers in the second treatment group. Okay, so what we can observe so far is that this result seems to mostly be driven by producers being more likely to sell at the median price of 200. We're still exploring the mechanisms to figure out exactly where this negative result is coming from, as it was, and sort of moving in the direction that we did not expect. And with regards to the other outcomes that we have here, so revenue for sales did not really seem to, have neither a positive or negative significant impact. And we seem to have a little bit of less, quantity sold in treatment 1 than comparing to treatment 2. But this is not very robust. So this is the results that we have so far to share with you. And of course, that at the moment, it seems that so we have producers reporting an increase in use of the market information system. We have producers reporting the average price received in those villages to be lower, and that this is being larger in the villages that receive the buyer's contacts. And what we are doing now is we are evaluating this mechanism. We're going to conduct a lot of heterogeneous effects to sort of understand this unexpected result, okay? And to do that, we're also going to introduce something that we consider to be very important, which is these behavioral games to which we also collected data, particularly on trust, on information, and on public good, okay? So this is still to be analyzed in detail, but we think that it might be super important, particularly in this very atypical season, to be able to explore what happens in this market information systems with these atypical seasons, okay? And we think that these behavioral games are gonna help us explain a lot of what happened. And yeah, as I mentioned before, so next steps is to explore the secondary outcomes, and all this data that we were able to collect with SurveyCTO and we have not really used yet. And I think, that's it. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Matilde. Thank you, Guanghong. We do have a few questions that we have in our Q&A. So we'll get to those shortly. But before we do that, I just wanted to close off the poll that we were running. Hopefully, many of us have been able to respond to that. And we just had 2 relatively simple questions. The first one was just asking how the attendees conduct primary data collection in agriculture, or whether they have conducted any primary data collection in agriculture. 78% said yes, and so that's really good. It means obviously that your research is relevant to many of our attendees. They can relate in different ways to what you have. And the second one was asking what method of primary data collection is being used. You can see that most of our attendees are using some type of copy. Okay, so again, they can relate to your using SurveyCTO and tools like that. And we actually have quite a good number who are also doing phone interviews. About 42% are doing phone interviews. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, and so thank you so much for everybody that was able to respond to that. Before we get into our Q&A, just a quick reminder that in case you found interesting our presentation mentioned, both our participants were part of awardees for the SurveyCTO program. And if you're interested in SurveyCTO, you can always reach out to us. Our sales team is available to help you test out SurveyCTO, but also to help you get started if you have not used SurveyCTO. If you're already using SurveyCTO, we have a support team that's available all the time for you to be able to ask any questions related to SurveyCTO. But also, we have a community of users that might include our presenters now, who are able to respond to any questions that you have in terms of how they use SurveyCTO as part of their workflows. And obviously, you can keep in touch with us using various social media platforms.